tonight, we're going to tell you the truth about whether out-of-state guns are responsible for Chicago's gun violence problem or not. With me now, senior legal policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, Amy Swearer. Amy, good to see you. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So start out with a very simple question here. This idea that Chicago's gun violence problem is the result of being inundated with out-of-state guns, true or false?
Absolutely false. Everything about what Mayor Lightfoot has said is false. I mean, presumably this premise that keeps getting floated around is a misrepresentation of a report from 2017, but it's actually a misread of the report. What the report actually says is the biggest source of guns used in crime in Chicago, at least the guns that have been recovered from crime, it's actually Illinois. In fact, 6 of the top 10 gun stores where recovered guns are traced to is actually Cook County, Illinois, where Chicago sits. So it's a complete misrepresentation of what the report says. And it's also just factually inaccurate, again, as David Harsanyi suggests, to say that these other states don't have gun control. That's just a lie.
It is a lie. It's also, I mean, you can do this comparison. So Illinois obviously has very strict gun control, right? Well, so does California and so does New York. All 3 of those states are bordered by states that have less strict gun laws. Yet Chicago's violence, their gun crime rates, we don't see that happening in California. We don't even see that happening in New York City, despite the increase in crime because of the recent riots and Black Lives Matter protests. So the theory or the hypothesis breaks down a little bit if you apply it anywhere else.
Yeah, it also breaks down if you look at places that are, considered to have not strict gun control at all. Places like Texas, that gets an F from a lot of gun control activists. When you look at Austin or Houston or San Antonio, similar sized cities that are prone to a lot of the same types of urban problems as Chicago, they're not seeing these types of gun violence crises, even though they supposedly have just as easy access to guns as people in Indiana that's getting blamed for the problems in Chicago. And on top of that, keep in mind that most of the guns used in crime in Chicago are handguns. So even assuming that they're coming from out of state, if you are an Illinois resident buying a gun in another state, buying a handgun in another state, you by definition, by virtue of federal law, have to go through a federally licensed firearms dealer and go through a background check. And so again, most of these crime guns in Chicago, doesn't matter where they were bought, someone had to, if they bought them lawfully, go through a background check.
Well, I think that's the thing. When you say if they bought them lawfully, this is what David Harsanyi writes. He says the vast majority of Americans obtain their guns in this manner, meaning through a federally licensed firearms dealer, and they rarely commit crimes. Around 7% of criminals in prison bought weapons using their real names. 7%. Fewer than 1% obtained them, the firearms, at gun shows. He goes on to say there have been around 18 million concealed carry permit holders over the past 15 years, and they've committed 801 firearm-related homicides over that span, or somewhere around 0.7% of all firearm-related murders. Concealed carry holders are not only the most law-abiding group, they're clearly less, they commit fewer crimes even than law enforcement does. That's an interesting statistic, though, when you talk about where criminals who commit gun crimes actually obtain their firearms. It's not actually by legal means. It's not even crossing a state line and buying it from a gun store there. Not at all.
No, absolutely not. And again, to go back to this 2017 report that it seems Mayor Lightfoot is relying on and misreading, you look at that too. And what you see when you read that report closely is that 90%, over 90% of these guns actually were caught on people who did not legally possess them. They were not the person who legally purchased them from a federal firearms licensee. That somewhere along the line, they got these through illegal channels. The problem was not the law-abiding citizen who went and bought it and underwent a background check. The problem is the underground, sort of the black market for gun activity.
Right. And Harsanyi says studies of those imprisoned on firearms charges show that most often they obtain their weapons by stealing them or buying them on the black market, which is exactly what you said. A smaller percentage, you said, gets them from family, friends, or from family members or from friends. So this has nothing to do with the gun laws in a state. In fact, it's actually it's a counter argument to gun control in general, because it shows you that gun control, who's going to follow the laws when there's strict gun control? Law-abiding citizens are. Criminals are not going to. So the people that are going to be armed are going to be the criminals. The people that are going to be defenseless are going to be the law-abiding citizens who need self-defense against the armed criminals. She's actually making the argument against her own policies.
Right. And that's the important thing here, too, is that it's already illegal for you, regardless of whether you're a private seller or whatever. It's illegal for you to give a gun, to sell a gun, to hand a gun to someone you know is a prohibited person or who otherwise is going to use it in criminal activity. That's already illegal. And yet the underground black market for guns is still being perpetuated by people who simply don't care.
Yeah. And then straw purchases, too. So this is a common talking points from the left that, straw purchases from even federally licensed firearm dealers result in guns being given to people who ought not to have them. Federal law, though, talk to me about that. It requires anybody who purchases more than 2 firearms, even if that person is a law-abiding citizen who's allowed to do that, federal law requires that dealer report that person at least to a database, correct?
That is correct. And on top of that as well, the argument goes that, you have like a handful of people who are just continually buying guns and reselling them. If you're doing that, if you are in the business, either officially or unofficially, of routinely selling firearms, and you do not register as a federal firearms licensee, that is already illegal. So again, they are already breaking the law if they are mass straw purchasing guns, because 1, they're breaking the law for straw purchasing it, and 2, they're breaking the law if they're repeatedly buying guns to then resell as a private dealer to someone else.
So moral of the story, the crimes being committed in the state of Illinois and in Chicago are already crimes. Criminals are committing the crimes despite the laws, just as conservatives predicted that they would. And Mayor Lori Lightfoot is using this talking point that is false no matter what angle you view it from. Amy, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.